Ladies and gentlemen, Mark Baird.
Can you stop the pictures now?
You want me to stop them?
Yeah, stop them because it's distracting.
Everybody hear me? Thanks for coming to listen to me, yet again. Just what you want, more yammering out of me. I'm here to talk to you about progress and what's going on, and there are a lot of things going on. It's almost unbelievable. Hey, Coop, was that your horse with a flag over its hind quarters? Tell the truth. Was that your horse? Darn, I figured it was. Daniel Webster said, "Hold on, my friends, to the Constitution and to the republic for which it stands. For miracles do not tend to cluster, and what's happened once in 6,000 years is not likely to happen again." And Daniel's right. We have a constitution in the state of California that doesn't work anymore. This is our constitution from 1879. And we have to ask ourselves yet again, why do we have this constitution? What do we care? What's it supposed to accomplish? And if it's not accomplishing those things, what can we do to make that constitution work? And we think obviously it's to separate, but I've got a couple of interesting statistics here I want to read to you, and I'd like to ask you to really think about these things and to make up your minds that you're going to do something about these things with real action. I mean, it's one thing to go to a meeting and everybody claps and everybody goes and they have a hamburger and they say, boy, that was great, and they go home and you kind of forget it. The daily life sort of leads you to that. We can't do that anymore. I'd like to ask two things. First of all, will anybody 30 and under stand up? Thank you. Okay, I didn't mean to embarrass you, so you can sit down now. You guys are the reason I'm here. I'm not here because I'm a big success. I'm not here because I lived my life so well and I did so many things that it gives me privilege to stand in front of you and preach to you. I'm here because I'm an absolute total failure. That's why I'm here today. And I failed in one very important thing. And this is something that we are in danger of all failing at. And this is the very reason I'm here. I'm here because I had one job that was given to me by the Constitution of the United States and the Declaration of Independence. That's the one job that was entrusted to me, and that was to secure liberty for my posterity. And I failed at that. I am not handing you young people a country that my father and my grandfather and my great-grandfather handed me. I'm handing you a country that I don't even recognize. It's a socialist country, and this is a socialist state. And it's a failed state. On top of being socialist, it's a failed state. We're $2 trillion in debt, depending upon who you listen to. We live in a state led by a liar, filled with state agencies led by liars, executing the lie in order to oppress you and take your property and to take your rights away from you. And these rights are very important. And this is some of the reason why not only myself, but a lot of people just like me are failures. In 1997, the Constitutional Center did a survey, and they asked people some questions. 84% of the people who answered this survey said that for government to work, people must be involved every day in government. 75% said that the Constitution mattered in their daily life. It made a difference to them in their daily life. Now, in this same survey, 41% of the people were not aware that there were 3 branches of government. You can laugh, but it's true. And 62% of the people in this same survey could not name the 3 branches of government. 33% couldn't name any of them. And that's in the same survey where 75% of the people said the Constitution mattered in their daily lives. And it's a failing on our part because we're not teaching young people what's in the Constitution. We're not teaching them how important those things are. And so we ask ourselves, why do we even have a Constitution? Who cares? And we know the answers to these questions. Because like I've said to you before, and some of you might remember this, the courts have two principles that are very important to our jurisdiction. And what I want to talk about before I talk about how we go forward are those four principles. The first of those principles is jurisdiction. How can we get away with what we're doing? What gives us the legal right, the moral imperative to do what we're doing and trying to form the 51st state? The second thing is sovereignty. If we create the state of Jefferson, we also create sovereignty. And by the way, I can prove every single thing I'm telling you with a legal principle, a legal document that I have right in front of me or in my bag, or I can pull up on my computer. None of these things are my opinion. They're the opinion of people far smarter than I am who did much greater things than I'll ever do. So with that sovereignty, we can conduct our lives the way we, the people, see fit. That's what sovereignty guarantees us. And we are guaranteed sovereignty as the state of Jefferson. In fact, we're guaranteed sovereignty as the state of California. But a liberty unexercised is a liberty lost. And that's where we've come to disaster in the state of California. We have a tremendous amount of power. We have a tremendous amount of liberty. And we haven't exercised any of it for a very long time. And so those liberties have been lost to us in a sense. But I don't want to sound like Eeyore the donkey. I'm not here to tell you how bad things are. I'm here to tell you how good things are. Because of these principles, we can fix every single bit of this. And we can do it in a span of time that a lot of us gray hairs will be around to see. I mean, we can fix this. It is within our power. And I'll explain why in a minute. Once we have gained sovereignty, we can use the principle of interposition. Interposition is a very powerful concept. And it is what William Blackstone in Blackstone's Commentary on Law called the old doctrine where states can nullify activity by the federal government that is unconstitutional or extra-constitutional. William Blackstone was an interesting guy. His commentaries on law, part 1 and 2, were the primary textbooks in every law school in the United States of America until around 1928, which was just 10 or 15, 20 years into the progressive era, at which point they were eliminated because Woodrow Wilson believed that we should have a governing elite because ordinary people like us are too stupid to know how to conduct our lives, and we're too stupid to understand liberty and how we should act. So there should be a governing elite, and they will be in a position to tell everybody else what to do, and then you'll do it because you're too dumb to know what to do yourself. And that's what Woodrow Wilson believed, and that's what he put into practice, and that's why Blackstone's Commentary on Law was removed from all law schools in the United States, and it's no longer taught. In fact, the Constitution is barely taught in law schools now. So with that interposition, we can use nullification. And that nullification is very important because states have sovereignty. We have absolute sovereignty, and I'll prove that to you in a minute. Even California has that, and I'll show you how. And with that nullification, we can guarantee our inalienable rights. We have inalienable rights anyway, right? Those aren't given to us. We don't have constitutional rights. We have inalienable rights. Those are the rights that John Locke called the natural rights, the rights that were placed in our bodies at the moment of our creation and apply to all men and women who were born, who were created. And William Blackstone went on to further qualify those as the absolute rights. That's what Blackstone called them. And he said the absolute rights, and among those were life, liberty, and property, according to John Locke. And Blackstone said the absolute rights were those rights which men enjoyed, and he meant men and women, by the way, which men enjoyed whether they live in a society or not. Those are just rights you have because you were created a free and independent being, according to Article 1, Section 1 of the California Constitution. You were created an independent being, and as such, you enjoy certain inalienable rights. And in the federal Constitution, it said we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men were created equally, and that they were endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, among those life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So what are the inalienables? That's what Blackstone called the absolute rights, rights that you enjoy whether you live in a hole in the ground on the side of the Rocky Mountains and you never see a government official or anybody else in your entire life, or whether you live here in Redding, California. You have the right to life. You were created, and your life was a gift from your Creator. And these concepts are very important, and I don't care whether you're a Christian or not. I really don't. These things are just the truth. And I can prove them. I can prove these concepts in 10,000 documents, 10,000 letters, 10,000 speeches, and 10,000 books written by the people who founded this country. These are the principles upon which our government was founded. And whether you believe in Jesus Christ or not is not my business. That's not a pill I'm selling. I believe it myself. But it is the truth that our nation was created upon Christian principles. In fact, our state was created upon Christian principles, and I'll prove that in a minute too. So these rights that we enjoy, the inalienable rights, are your right to life. That's yours. It was a gift from your Creator. And so you have the right to protect that life, don't you? Because what good is your life if you can't protect it? And I don't care if you live here in town or in a hole in the side of a mountain. If someone came to take your life, you would natural right, defend that life, wouldn't you? I mean, that's just the instinct for survival that all creatures who are created by our God enjoy. You have the right to property. Whether you live in a hole in the side of the hill and you gathered some rocks and you use those rocks to make a fire or pound out animal skins or crush potatoes or whatever you do, how would it work if you came home to your hole in the ground every night and your rocks were gone? It would be pretty hard to survive. And so you have the right to that property, and by that right, you have the right to defend that property because it wouldn't work otherwise. You wouldn't survive otherwise. And you have that right without anyone telling you that's okay. You have that right in spite of a government who tries to deny you that right. That is a Creator's gift to you. You have the right to your thoughts and to your speech. You can stand on the side of the mountain where your hole in the ground is, and you can sing the heck with the government, and you can sing whatever you want and say whatever you want. Now, in society, that right has to be tempered because you can't say fire in a crowded theater because that would cause your neighbors maybe to lose their life in the stampede toward the exit. So freedom and liberty are a little bit different, right? Liberty is freedom with responsibility and with morality, and we have to temper those things. And when we live in society, we delegate certain powers to government so that we can protect the inalienable liberties we hold most dear. Now, in the hole in the side of the ground, you can obviously say or do whatever you want, go wherever you want, be whomever you want. You can be whatever it is you wish to be. And you should be able to do that same thing in society. Those are your inalienable rights. And as John Locke said, life, liberty, and property, and then Samuel Adams added later, together with the means to defend those as best we can. Those things are without question. I don't care what the Constitution says. I don't care what the government thinks. I don't care what they do. And by the way, I'm a reserve deputy sheriff, so I do care about the law. But the inalienable rights are just that. They are those that are above law. They are those that do not depend on anyone's permission. However, if you fail to exercise liberty, liberty's lost, isn't it? In the California Constitution and in the 1879 Convention, the founders of this state decided that believing that Almighty God is the source of all power and authority in civil government and that the Lord Jesus Christ is the healer and ruler of all nations, that the revealed will of God is the supreme authority in all civil affairs, remembering that this country was settled by Christian men with Christian ends in view and that they gave a distinctly Christian character to the institutions which they established. So if we go to that principle the court calls the meeting of the minds, where when we have a contract and that contract is in dispute, the court orders all parties to go to the earliest documents and see what the authors of the contract really meant when they wrote the contract. We see that this state is a state founded on Christian principles because this nation was founded on Christian principles. And we read the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men were created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Let's go one step further, the California Constitution. Why do we need it? The founders of this state told us exactly why we need it in the preamble. We, the people of the state of California, grateful to Almighty God for our freedom, that to secure and perpetuate it, we establish this Constitution. That's pretty plain. That's what the founders of this state intended for you. Not just for the 6 months after they wrote the document. They intended that for you and your posterity forevermore. The federal Constitution, why do we need that? Well, let's go back one step. Who are we protecting our freedom from? Who are we securing it from? We had just won a war with Mexico. We weren't securing it from the Mexican government, they were gone. No one else was threatening this republic, this California republic at the time of the 1850 or 1848 constitutional conventions. So who did we need to secure and perpetuate our freedom? Who did we need to protect ourselves from? The federal government, right? That was the only other entity on the continent big enough to take our freedom away from us, wasn't it? And so why do we have the jurisdiction to protect our freedom from the federal government? And that's where we come to state sovereignty. And California, just like every other state, has an act. It is the piece of legislation that created our state. It's called an Enabling Act, and Jefferson will have one of those as well. The Enabling Act is very interesting because it says, the state of California shall be one and is hereby declared to be one of the United States of America and admitted into the Union on an equal footing, and here's the good part, with the original states in all respects, whatever. Equal footing with all the original states, the original 13, in all respects, whatever. What does that mean to us? How much land does BLM have in the state of New York? 0. How much land does BLM have in the state of Massachusetts? 0. How much land does BLM have in the state of Virginia? 0. And I could go on, I could say that 13 times, but I think you get the point. How much land does the federal government claim jurisdiction over in the state of California? About 52%. So that means half of the land mass of the state of California is not under state control. It is our land, it's within the borders of the state of California. However, the federal government has usurped the power of sovereignty over 52% of our land. In Siskiyou County, it's 68% of the land in Siskiyou County is not on the tax rolls, does not benefit the taxpayer, and in fact is not controlled by the government of Siskiyou County. Why is that important? Well, because Article 11, Section 1 of the California Constitution says counties are legal subdivisions of the state and are responsible for all the territory within their boundaries. How responsible are we when we don't own it and don't get any tax revenue from it? And Shasta County has the same number, and Trinity County, it's even worse. So we come to a point here where we start to see a pattern emerge. We've not only been subjugated by the federal government unconstitutionally because our legislation tells us we have equal sovereignty with the original 13 states. But what does that mean to us as a state? That's very interesting because the last paragraph in the Declaration of Independence, and when you read these things, folks, read them literally because that's how they were meant. These are not metaphors for something else. You have equal sovereignty. That sort of means you can play hockey if you want to. Equal sovereignty means sovereignty. And if you look these words up, look them up in Noah Webster's 1828 dictionary because that was the dictionary for the language in which these documents were written. And that's where the meanings come from. So what does that sovereignty mean to us? Well, in the last paragraph of the Declaration of Independence, it says, we, the colonies, now become free and independent states equal to any state in the world. Wow. We have equal sovereignty with England, France, Spain, Portugal, Peru, Bolivia, any place. Our state does. Now, as a state of the United States in Article 1, Section 8, we delegated some powers to the federal government in order to protect the liberties we hold most dear. In other words, we recognize as a state that we don't have the horsepower to fight a war with some foreign nations. We don't have the horsepower to conclude trade agreements like all 50 states together would have. We don't have the horsepower to negotiate those agreements. So we have delegated in Article 1, Section 8, certain powers to the federal government, but they are strictly limited. Those powers are the enumerated powers. In other words, if it ain't in Article 1, Section 8, you can't do it, federal government, because we have sovereignty. And that sovereignty means we're equal with any nation in the world. And this is in the Declaration of Independence. And by the way, our states, the original 13 and California by default, were sovereign nations for over 10 years while the war was being conducted. There were no Articles of Confederation, there was no Constitution. We were 13 sovereign nations, and we agreed to participate in a continental Congress so that we could prosecute a war as one, but there was nothing that was binding over any one colony or any one state over another. No state had advantage, no state had more or less power than any of the others. We simply cooperated to defeat our former government. And at that moment, we became United States. And under the Articles of Confederation, we were United States, and the federal government had no power whatsoever unless a state gave it that power at that time for that particular purpose, and then the next day it was over. Now that didn't work so well, the people then determined, but remember, we had 10 presidents of Congress. We didn't have a president of the United States under the Articles. It was a president of Congress, but it didn't work very well. So the guys got together again in Philadelphia for a constitutional convention. And by the way, they were breaking the law, because one of the Articles of Confederation says nobody can change these articles unless the states agree. So here these guys showed up, and they said, the first thing they said was, we want to throw the whole thing out and start over and write a constitution. Several delegates left. New York, most notably, they said, we don't have the power to do that. We don't have the blessing of our state. We came down here to talk about fishing in the Delaware River and a couple other things. And they left. But the rest of them stayed. And how did they get away with that? What gave them the original jurisdiction in order to scrap a form of government that was well established over 10 years, had political power, had the rule of law, had the weight of law, had legal precedent? All just power is inherent in the people. Article 2, Section 1 of the California Constitution. All just power, all just political power is inherent in the people. Government is established for their good, and they have the right to alter or reform that government anytime the public good demands it. You don't have the permission to change government with your vote, or to campaign or get a petition or sign an initiative. You have the right to alter government anytime it fails to serve you. Why do we have the right to form a state of Jefferson? Because all just political power is inherent in the people, and whenever government doesn't work, we have the right to alter that government anytime we see fit. And the federal Constitution has much the same verbiage. All power is inherent in the people. When government is destructive to their ends, they have the right to alter or abolish it. Why did they have to put that in? Because they just abolished the Articles of Confederation. They needed just a little justification here. So in the Constitution of the United States, they gave everybody that power, and they gave it to us forever. Why did we form the government of the United States? Who cares? Who are we afraid of? We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, promote domestic tranquility, so on and so forth, and to secure liberty for our posterity. That's the only reason we have government, is to secure liberty. Not to build a train, not to get Medicare, not to get Medicaid, not to give people stuff for nothing, not to take stuff away from people. All of those things come in time, and with the changes that people decide to make for their own benefit, I'm not making a comment on those. But our purpose for being here is liberty. And without liberty, I'm going to tell you something, because I have been all over the world, literally. I've flown to every country that has an airport longer than 5,000 feet, and a couple of airports that didn't even have runways, like plank steel stuff in Somalia and southern Sudan and the Democratic People's Republic of Congo. And I am here to tell you another truth. Without liberty, none of the rest matters. Because without liberty, you're not going to be allowed to keep the money. Without liberty, you're not going to be allowed to defend yourself. Without liberty, you're not going to be able to keep your property. And even if you do get to keep your property, you're not going to be able to use that property to make a living for yourself and your family. And in fact, Benjamin Franklin said, if property isn't secure, liberty cannot exist. Because you have to be able to count on the things you own to make a living for yourself and your family. You have to be able to use those things. Do you have that power in California? No. You don't even have the power to say how many bullets you put in your gun. You don't have the power to say what kind of gasoline you want to have. You're lucky you have the power to put mustard on a hot dog, and that's probably in the legislature right now. Or a water well, or use the water well. Or in my case, use irrigation water that's been attached to the deed of my land for over 150 years, since before the state of California even existed. I'm getting sued right now because we went and turned our water on. And Fish and Game said, no, fish are more important than the people the water serves. So they're going to sue us, and the fines are totaling more than $154,000 for turning on our water once. Oh, and by the way, it's supposedly a misdemeanor. Well, when I read California law, and remember I'm a cop, so I read the law, misdemeanors, the maximum fine is $1,000. So how is it the state of California can charge someone $154,000 for a misdemeanor when the top fine in a misdemeanor is $1,000? No liberty, that's why. All right, so we've done something about this. We have 13 counties that have signed declarations and petitions to withdraw from the state of California due to lack of representation and dilution of vote. That's what we're doing. The people of this county and 12 other counties, with more to follow very shortly, have declared that we will use our absolute right to alter and reform government. And we're going to form a state that represents us and that is a constitutional republic where property is protected and you have the right to self-defense and the rights to liberty. And I'll shorten that up because I could go on and on about that too, as you all well know. Now what we will do is on January the 6th, we're going to take the remaining declarations that we haven't turned in. And by turn in, we record these with the Secretary of State, the Speaker of the Assembly, and the Senate Pro Tem. What we're doing with the declaration is we are petitioning our government for redress of grievance. Anybody know the Bill of Rights at all? That's Amendment number 1. That's one of the things in Amendment 1. So we are petitioning our government for redress of this grievance. And then what we do, we declare to the Senate and the Assembly that the remedy for that petition is separation from California to form our own state. What the Secretary of State, the Senate Pro Tem, and the Speaker of the Assembly are supposed to do in order to redress that grievance is pass a copy of our declaration out to each and every one of the members in that House. And they are supposed to act on that grievance. In our favor, not in our favor, you know, we can't tell them that, but we can instruct them to act. They haven't. I don't even think they read them. In fact, I think they threw them away. And so what we will do then is utilize Article 4, Section 3 of the United States Constitution, which says, nor shall a state be formed from the territory of an existing state or two adjoining states unless the state legislature affected agrees and Congress agrees. Okay, so we have a way out. We can do an Article 4, Section 3 state split. That's what we're doing. It's been done before. We're not making this up. We've had 4 state splits in our history. Maine from Massachusetts, Vermont from New York, West Virginia, and Tennessee from Virginia. Okay, so that's been done before, and that's the path we're on. Now, when we submit the legislation sometime shortly after January 6th, There isn't one person in the legislature that can't say they don't know what it is we're doing and why we want to do it. We don't have representation. Why don't we? Because one state senator represents 11 counties. Because one state senator represents 1 million people. Because one assembly person represents 500,000 people, and that is the worst representative benchmark in the United States of America, and it's around 300 or 400% worse than state number 49. Our attorneys really like this case because our representative benchmarks are so skewed that it is going to be an easy point to make in the Supreme Court. Once we submit our declarations and petitions, we will then submit legislation, which I've already written. It's already been reviewed by an attorney. We'll submit that to the legislature. In a perfect world, they will vote 50% plus one, and away we go to Congress, and they'll vote 50% plus one. And at that point, committees of reconciliation would be formed, and that's part of the legislation. Every county in the state of Jefferson will elect by popular vote one representative. The Board of Supervisors of each county will appoint one representative, and the 10 largest incorporated cities in the state of Jefferson will each get one representative of their own because large populations need to be reflected too. That will give us approximately 50, and then the robbers and crooks in California can get their 50 however they want to. At that point, those people will meet. There will be a panel of retired judges who will charge the committee and apportion subsections of the committee to work on transportation, assets, debt, bridges, bulldozers, and whatever else needs to be separated. Now, the state's Attorney General, Camilla Harris, this isn't my opinion, I can show you where she wrote it. Her opinion is that all assets formerly belonging to the state of California, which lie within the state of Jefferson, belong to the state of Jefferson. That's her opinion, not mine. I'm good with it. What we need to do along the way, though, is we need to somehow form a mechanism, and we're working on this. One of our guys is a real techno geek, and he's working on this, how we can keep them from switching out all the new Caltrans trucks and the new Caltrans bulldozers for the junky stuff that they have down below or in the boneyard. So we have to work on some things, and believe me, this is going to be a scrappy deal. It's not going to be easy. And that commission, that committee of reconciliation will be charged with a 2-year term. At the end of 2 years, anything not resolved will go to binding arbitration, 2 members selected by Jefferson in whatever manner we deem, and 2 members selected by the robbers down south, and they can do whatever they want to get there too. And those final things will be decided by arbitration, and then we begin state government. Somewhere along the way, we have a state constitutional convention, and what we're doing right now is I'm taking all of the constitutions from the small rural states, picking out the best stuff. I'll put that in one document, and then our constitutional convention, and it'll have elected representatives from each county, and we'll meet and take that document, and believe me, that's not going to be the law. And they will rip that apart and somehow make a constitution that everybody likes or that everybody can live with. And the point of our constitution is California's constitution has been amended 522 times in 164 years. It is what E. Dodson Wilson calls, and he's the state parliamentarian for about 4 decades. He wrote a book about it, actually. It's very interesting. He said the Californian Constitution is the joke of the legal world, and it is everything a constitution ought not to be. I'll just give you an example. Article 19 of the 1879 Constitution was, it is a felony to hire a Chinese person. That was on the books until 1952. The California Constitution is one of the longest constitutions in the United States at over 110,000 words. This is 6,500 words. And it has served us for 238 years and has only been amended 17 times. And it's the greatest nation on earth because of this. And the California Constitution is this. Did you know we had a constitutional committee in California? That is a body that was appointed originally, I believe, by Pete Wilson, and their task was to shorten the California Constitution. He gave them the power to alter the California Constitution without the benefit of the legislature or of you. And they're out there changing the document. And nobody even knows about them, much less can stop them. But I read certain articles. Have you ever read the California Constitution? That's kind of a silly question. Not very many people have. I read it once just to see if I could. Boy, that is a labor. It talks about school busing and all kinds, and prisoners' rights to sue and all kinds of stuff that should be codified in health and safety codes or government codes, or quite frankly, nowhere at all. But E. Dodson Wilson was right. The California Constitution is a joke of the legal world. It's absolutely a travesty of justice, and it's being perpetrated on you. I had a run-in with a fish and game guy. He had done a traffic stop and he called for assistance, and I showed up. He had a guy that had a rifle on the seat of his truck. That's against the law in California, because you don't have the right to defend your life in California. You don't. Because it is against the law in California to openly carry a loaded rifle, and it is against the law in California to openly carry an unloaded rifle. Well, if you can't carry a gun that's loaded and you can't carry a gun that's empty, I guess you could carry a stick, but even that could be considered a dangerous weapon. So you don't have the right of self-defense in California. Well, anyway, I showed up and I knew this guy, and he was yelling at this guy about his gun, and I said, "Hey, Beck, have you ever read the Constitution?" He said, "Sure I have." And I said, "No, you haven't." He said, "Yes, I have." I said, "You've read the Constitution of California." "Oh, sure, I read it." And I said, "You haven't, and I'll prove it." "What's the first line in it?" I don't want to, in fact, what are the first 3 words in it? He couldn't answer me, and I said, "Declaration of Rights." I'll bet you very few people, and I'm not trying to insult you, but I'll bet you very few people in this room know that. Because it is a horrible document and no one reads it. And if we can't define our liberty, as Chris Ann Hall says, how can we defend it? And if we can't define tyranny, how can we defeat it? It's up to all of us to educate ourselves. Once we submit our legislation for state split, it is bloody likely, I don't even need a show of hands for this, how many people think we're going to be ignored at the state level? Okay, a lot, and probably everybody should. Because what we want to do is form a constitutional republic where every single county has a state senator, and no county can be rounded down so that they don't have representation in the assembly. Every county will have at least one assembly person as well. Well, California says you're not going to do that on our watch, and a Los Angeles state senator put it best to me when he said, the only reason you people up there want to do that is because you want to take our water. Yeah, my sentiments exactly. And he was dead. I'm telling you what, you don't understand. These guys are dead serious about this. Shasta Dam is holding Los Angeles' water. The Sacramento River, that is the water that belongs to Los Angeles. And they are dead serious about it, probably, Coop. They are dead serious about that. So that's one of the things that we need to defeat. And it's nothing more than a sales job, and I believe we can do it. If not in the legislature, we'll do it in court. So if we submit our legislation and it's rejected, out of hand, doesn't make it out of committee, we're ignored, then we go to Plan B, which is to sue the state of California for dilution of vote and lack of representation. And we can certainly prove that. And if they reject our petition without even reading it, without even looking at it, without even giving it a 10-minute hearing in committee, guess what they've done? They have made our case for us. Federal challenges require 3 things to be true. First of all, you have to have asked for something. And we're asking for representation. That gives primary jurisdiction to federal courts because we are accusing a state of bad behavior. That puts the ball in the federal court immediately. We get this out of state court because Sir Thomas Cook said all courts are corrupt. They're corrupt by their very nature because the judge knows who signs his paycheck. Would we get a fair hearing in a state court? Absolutely not, because the governor signs that guy's paycheck. Thomas Jefferson and James Madison and Alexander Hamilton, the original big government guy in Federalist 78, he said that the courts are by nature the weakest branch of government because they have no power of enforcement that belongs to them exclusively. And however, if the judicial branch of government is successful in combining itself with any one or 2 of the other branches, it becomes all powerful and liberty will be lost. Well, if the judicial branch of the state of California knuckles to the will of the executive, now all of a sudden they have the weight of 2/3 of California's government, and since the legislature is absolutely without backbone and spine, the court in California now becomes all three branches of government, and there is no government to interpose between us and the people, between our Constitution and the people, between our government and the people. So now we have the federal government lined up to take our stuff, and the state government turns around and faces the people, and they want to take our stuff too. And that's the end of interposition, because what is our government supposed to do? Secure liberty. And what if they fail to do that? Now we have no one standing between us and the wolves. So we must resort to a well-known principle in law called self-help. If the government fails to do its job, we have the right to alter or abolish it. What we will do then is sue the state for lack of representation and dilution of vote. We have 3 attorneys. We're raising money. And our attorneys, one of whom has won cases in front of the United States Supreme Court, really like what we're doing. And California, quite frankly, is playing straight into our hands. Every unconstitutional act they make, every time they snub us, every time they ignore us, they simply make our case for us. Willie Brown, the former Speaker of the Assembly, he said in an interview to MSNBC, and this is a quote, "All political power has passed to the big cities where it belongs. And those people up there just need to learn to obey." Yeah, I'd say the gauntlet has been thrown, huh? Well, once we have our court case going, then it will simply be a matter of winding through the Ninth Circuit. And the interesting part of this legally is that the Ninth Circuit can do no wrong here. Wow, that's a concept, right? The most communist court in California can't, or in the United States, can't do any wrong. The reason is because if they give us what we want, California is going to appeal. Primary jurisdiction after the appellate court goes right to the Supreme Court in voter dilution cases. Because liberty is why this country was founded. And the court does know certain things in their dim little memory. They do know a few things. If the Ninth Circuit fails to give us what we want, we appeal to the United States Supreme Court. If they give us what we want, California is going to appeal to the Supreme Court anyway. Because the last thing on earth they want you to have is liberty. Now, what can we do to make this happen? Number one, keep doing what you're doing. We have a declaration in Shasta County. Continue to get signatures. Volunteer with Win Carpenter. The more signatures we have, the wider our political base becomes, and the more weight our judicial assault gains. The next thing you can do, we have a website, soj51.net, and there's a button on the website called 51sters. Click on that button. It'll ask you to fill out a simple form, and that's for notification purposes, so you can be notified when to begin this activity, and it's probably going to start on January 7th. But once you fill this form out, every time you click on that button, 3 different names and 3 different phone numbers will come up. Here's what we need, and here's where the people have all the power. We want to get 10,000 people who are willing to make 3 lousy phone calls 5 days a week. I've practiced this. It takes less than 10 minutes. I usually do it while I'm drinking my coffee in the morning. And you click on that button, 3 names come up, and you call each one of those names, and they're the names of 3 legislators in California. And if you click that button 100 times in a day, 3 different names will come up each and every time. And what we want to do is we want to engineer a situation where we are making 30,000 phone calls a day to the California legislature. Can you imagine what impact that would have? Can you imagine if you guys just in this room alone were to make 1 call a day to a targeted supervisor of the Shasta County Board? Pick an issue, I don't care what it is, walking your dog, benches in the park, but if each of you would make 1 call a day, can you imagine the impact that would have? It would be tremendous. Well, if we could find 30,000 phone calls a day and send those to Sacramento, those people would have to get new phones. It would burn down the switchboard, and no one would be able to say that people don't want liberty. And the court would have to listen to our plea. We could literally shut down the Capitol switchboard. And that is our goal and nothing less. And it takes seconds. You call, you say, I favor the state of Jefferson, we don't have representation, and when that bill comes up for a vote, I want you to vote yes on it. Click. That's it. That's all you have to do. The staffer sitting at the desk doesn't really care who you are, they don't even really care what you want. But when a trend develops, they start a piece of paper, yeses and nos. Jefferson, yeses and nos. Yes, 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 yes. And if they had 30,000 yeses a day, 5 days a week, you can even take weekends off, for a year or two or whatever it took, this takes less than 10 minutes a day, folks. The other thing we need is our court case is going to cost $500,000. Yeah, well, that sounds like a lot of money, doesn't it? But it's not over 1 million people. You know what? Over the 1 million people that live in the state of Jefferson, that's $2 each, or that's half a buck each, right? So if we had 5,000 people that would give $100 each for Jefferson, if you just give a $2 bill, that's what the bill Jefferson's on, give a Jefferson for Jefferson, we'll make it. We already have enough to get this can kicked way down the road. But we need more because we need to be able to stick with this no matter how long it takes until we gain liberty for ourselves and our posterity. That's what we need. We need 51sters, we need signatures, and we need people to give a Jefferson for Jefferson. And I know I've said this to you all before, most of you know it, but liberty was a gift. You didn't pay for it. It was paid for with the lives, the treasure, and the sacred honor of your forefathers. Liberty does have a price, eternal vigilance. We failed in that, but it's not too late, not by a long shot. This is not over, folks. So what I'm asking you is today, what are you willing to do to secure liberty for your posterity? And if we do this right, if we think 50 generations ahead, if we create a constitution that is cast in concrete for the principles of liberty and make that constitution extremely difficult to change, we can secure liberty for 50 generations before some bright load of politicians figures out how to get around it. And then it'll be someone else's turn to secure liberty for their posterity. I'm here because I'm a failure, but I will not remain a failure. You have my pledge and my promise that I will never give up. I won't take a dime for what I'm doing. I never have, never will. I don't want position or power or money. I don't want any of that stuff. I want liberty for my children because that is my gift to them. Is this too hard? No, it's not too hard. We used to be known as a people that did hard things routinely. I can quote you 100 times when someone stood against the hurricane and bled out in order to secure liberty for their posterity. One of the first fatalities in the Revolutionary War was a freed black man named Crispus Attucks, who literally gave his only free breath for liberty. Am I willing to do less? I will do that and more if that's what it takes. I'm asking you to join me.
Okay.